Hello everyone, Christina the Crafty here to share with you a really cool project today. I am so ecstatic that I was not only inspired but had the time and the wonderful crafty day with my girlfriends so that I could get some paper crafting in this year. So this card, I made it for my husband. It's for his birthday this month. And he actually gave me the idea for the theme because I told him I was struggling to get like ideas of what I wanted to do this year. And so he gave me the idea. He's like, I'm thinking you're going to make a Dracula card. And then I rolled with it. So I use a lot of Tim Holtz goodies and a lot of really cool techniques. So I will walk through this card with everything that I did and all the supplies that I used, um, so that you guys are inspired and know exactly what I did in case you guys ever wanted to try out some stuff. So anyway, I'm going to do some close-ups for you so you guys can see. Hopefully the camera cooperates here. And this is a really big card. But yeah, and if you hear some meowing in the background, it's Grayson. He's having a conniption because I closed the door and he's acting like, he needs the door open. So anyway, so you'll see a bunch of cool stuff. Hopefully the light is capturing it. Hopefully it's doing it justice. So that is the front of the card. And you can see some of the dimension there. And then this is the inside of the card here. And I'll pull that up close so you guys can see. And then here's the back of the card. So anyways, I'm going to get into the techniques and what I used. And I'll start putting some of this stuff on the table and walk you through it. Okay, so I've laid out on the table all of the supplies that I use, minus my die cut machine and my, obviously, paper trimmer and my heating gun and I think like my spray bottle or something. So anyway, so just like some of my tools, I didn't lay them out. But since I had a craft day with my girlfriends for the first time in 2025 for this year, we had a really nice craft day, and that's when I got started with that. So I had everything in a bag ready to go. So I just went ahead and left it in the bag so that I would have it ready for this video. All right, so the first thing that I did was we'll start with the bottom layer. So this card measures, it is 6 inches, oops, by 9 inches. So this is a 6x9 card. It's not your typical card, but I do like working with these big cards, and my husband likes big cards like this too. Anyway, so I started with a piece of watercolor paper. So I wanted something that was sturdy enough, that would hold up in time, and that it would take all of the like mediums and things that I wanted to do, which were going to be probably like using wet mediums, glues, things like that, in multiple layers and paint. So I wanted to make sure that I had something that was going to be able to withstand the extra moisture. So the first thing that I did was I cut down a piece of watercolor paper to the size that I wanted. I scored it in the middle and then I folded it. And so layer number 1, you're going to see this texture here. I don't know if the camera's picking it up, but it almost looks like wrinkled leather all throughout. And I kind of wanted that old, like grungy, leathery effect you can see there. So how I achieved that was I first, on the piece of watercolor paper, I went ahead and put a layer of extra heavy gel. Now this is just what I had opened already. This is a gel that's used in like, for artists, or for, you can use it as a glue. So this heavy body, extra heavy gel, it's a little bit thicker than your regular gel medium, but it does the same effect. So I use the press and seal to kind of keep it sealed. But as you can see, it's just like white. I don't know if you can tell, but it's just like a glue, but it's has more of like a thicker pasty texture. And mine's a little, I've had this one open for a while, so it is a little bit more dried out than if you were to open a brand new one. I do have a brand new one because the last time I used this before this project, I felt like mine was finally starting to dry out a little bit, so I wanted to have a fresh one ready to go. So I use this as my base instead of using Mod Podge, because my Mod Podge was actually, hold on, I gotta find something to clean my finger off here with. My Mod Podge was actually separating, so I went ahead and grabbed that one to use it. And so what I did was I first put a layer of this heavy, extra heavy gel, but you can also use gel medium as well. And I put that on the cardstock. Then I took this black tissue paper, which was actually one of the tissue papers that one of my friends used to package my husband's Christmas gifts with. So anyway, so I saved the tissue paper from a gift, and I crinkled it up as much as I could, and then I just cut a piece that was just a little bit bigger than the card. And after I put the one layer of Mod Podge, this all crinkled up, I put one layer on it and then cut around it. The first time I kind of like flattened it too much, so it kind of like took away some of that wrinkled feeling, and I knew I was going to have to do a lot of layers, but anyway. So I ended up doing 3 layers of tissue paper, and basically a series of laying down some of the gel and then putting crinkled tissue paper over it, lightly let it kind of dry in place, and like glue down any of like the edges with the paintbrush. So I first was using this one to kind of do like a heavy layer of the gel first. And then um I ended up doing 3 layers, and letting them dry in between until I achieved this super cool wrinkly effect throughout. So when I was happy with that, then I started making the splashes of blood. So the reason you're going to see I have like all of these red paints out is because I then started making a mixture of this, because I wanted to use this stencil here to do the blood splatter. And this is Tim Holtz. It's number THS 130. So that's this one. I don't know if it grime layering stencil. So that's the part number for this one. So I wanted to do the splatter with this, and I wanted to use some texture paste. I actually didn't realize that it was the crackle paste, but it was fine. I just basically needed some dimensional paste, and I figured I would ink it. I would change the color of it with using some like red paint and red inks. But because this is a white base, I was not achieving that deep red that I needed. It was still kind of like a pinkish. So I started getting out some other red paints and kept adding to the mixture. Just some of this, this has been in my stash for like probably a decade and a half, because this was like 49 cents at one point. And so, but all of these together were still just not quite achieving the color that I wanted. So this was like one of my tester when I had some extra paint. When I had like some extra paint stuff left over, I put it on this black cardstock, and as you can see, the difference between like this is like a really bright red, and this is more of like a really glossy, deeper red. So since I wasn't achieving quite what I wanted while this texture paste was still wet after I applied it with the stencil, I went ahead and took this embossing powder, Rich Red by Ranger, and I put it over the wet paste and paint mixture that I had, so that would be like the base. So I sprinkled it with this, and then I used my heating gun, and I ended up, heat embossing it to achieve that. And the same process was used, and the same paint mixture was used here on the inside to achieve this glossy paint splatter. Now, the only thing is that I did do a little bit extra was, you'll notice there's some areas here, like here and here, that are just like X, and some of these dots that are extra glossy. So what I did was this paint, the embossing powder didn't quite stick to some of these areas very well. So there was like some, red that was a little brighter, kind of like this, and some of it that was the deep red from the embossing powder. So what I did is I took my Nouveau Crystal Glaze, and I just put some glaze stuff on all the areas that just weren't glossy enough, so that it would actually look, nice glossy and like wet blood. The other thing that I did use this product for was to put some gloss on the eyes and then to put some gloss on the blood drop that comes out of this die cut. All right, so there's that. So I went ahead and used all of these. I didn't quite achieve. I did candied apple, lumberjack plaid, and barn door. Yeah, and then I also did this just red, Christmas red acrylic paint to try and achieve, but ultimately this is what ended up doing the ticket. This is called Rich Red by Ranger. It's just your plain embossing powder. That's actually what ended up achieving the color that I actually needed for the blood. All right, so once I was happy with the blood splatter and the glossiness and all that, I started working on my gold accents because, Dracula, he's, a vampire, but he's a classy guy, right? So I wanted some gold accents. And so I went ahead and used some gold foil paper and my glue stick here to create all of these little gold accents throughout. I also did that on this cathedral frame here. I ended up cutting this out of brown cardstock, just your plain cardstock. And then I inked it up with some paint. And I also did some gold foiling on it with this. So getting back to this, so when this tissue paper and the embossing powder was all dry, I went ahead and just took my glue stick and would, blot it in certain areas. And then just take the foil paper. This is just regular foil paper, nothing fancy, pretty side up, silver side down. And then I would just like stick it on the glue stick, rub it really hard, and then it would just stick on its own. It's super easy to do. As a matter of fact, I can demonstrate it here with this piece that I have here. So what you do is you just take your glue stick here and you just do a little dab there. Nothing big. You can kind of see a little bit right there. I sometimes let it dry just a little bit, but you really don't need to. And then you just, like, obviously this foil paper, you can see this is all the stuff that ended up transferring onto my project. But I still have some areas like right here that still have a lot of foil. So I can go ahead and I just rub it on where the glue was, and then ta-da, you peel it back and you have gold accents. This is a really cool, easy, and inexpensive technique to add some really cool gold flair to your projects. So anyway, so that's how I achieved that technique on there. And then I went ahead and started working on die cutting Mr. Dracula. So for Mr. Dracula, I went ahead and just grabbed my box of scraps of cardstocks that I have in my craft room. Anytime that I cut up cardstock, I go ahead and I save all of my scraps in these like paper sleeves, and by color. And so that way, whenever I'm working on a project and I need to do small die cuts, I just grab that instead of cutting fresh paper, unless, I don't have a piece big enough or I need a different color that's not in my scraps. So anyway, so I use this die from Tim Holtz. The part number is 660960, and he is called Vampire. So, yeah, there's a lot. There's like a lot of pieces. You can tell here, like this is all the pieces in the in here, and you have to layer them just so. But I was able to work it out, and I went ahead and just used exactly the colors that are already, part of like the packaging. I really, the colors that I wanted to use on my card were just like this anyway. So I figured, I would just roll with it and use the same ones. Didn't need to reinvent the wheel. And the only thing that I did different is, if you'll notice here, and my friend Kirsten helped me with this, just kind of like give me that idea. So when you first put them together, you can put him down here. But what we did is I put his face just a little bit higher up. So it looks like back here, the base is actually like right there, but that kind of looks like the back of his hair. So I didn't think it was a problem. That way it gave him a little bit more collar space, and it made him a little bit bigger because I kind of needed a bigger focal point for this card. And it just made him look like less scrunched up like he looks right here. All right. And by doing that, like the back here is supposed to be the red that's here in the eyes. So in order to still kind of, instead of having to cut more paper to make his eyes red, my friend Kirsten gave me the idea to just, cut out some eyes for him. So I cut them out in red and I put them behind there and then I just put some gloss on them. All right, so I cut Mr. Dracula up, put all of his pieces together. I used Distress Vintage Photo from Tim Holtz to ink the gray cardstock, the tan cardstock, the red, and the gray here. And then his lips. I did not ink his teeth, obviously. And then, yeah. Now, the black. So what I wanted to do is I didn't want the black to just kind of get lost on this card. So I cut out all of the bats here. And also on the black here, what I did is I used this in my stash. I had this Martha Stewart metallic black paint. It's called gunmetal, and it has like a very like pearlized. It's metallic, but has like a little pearly finish to it. And I figured I would ink his his black clothing and his hair and all of the bats. I just did it with my fingers, and some of them I did it with this paintbrush here. um I just went and just like, inked it to kind of give it some dimension. So you'll see that it looks like, all this blotchy stuff. I also used this same gunmetal when I used silver foil cardstock to cut out the inside of the window part. I went ahead and I used that paint with my fingers here. You could see the window kind of looks dirty, and I did that on purpose. I also took all of these little pieces before I inlay them, and I dipped them in the paint, like right there. I dipped it in the paint so it would look like an old aged window. So I cut it out of two colors, brown and silver foil, and that way I could have, I could inlay them. And then I also use just regular gold foil paper to hand fussy cut a frame for this, because like this whole way around there's like a gold edge here all the way around Dracula and the window, because I wanted it to kind of pop up from the black background. And I just, once I glued him and the window together, then I just went and laid it on top of the paper and I just fussy cut it all the way around. Nothing fancy. Now, with these bats, the bats that I cut were these bats from Tim Holtz, and the part number is 664203. These are called Bat Crazy. And I cut out a bunch of these bats for the inside and the outside of the card. And then I also used some black foam. I cut them out of foam as well so that I could add some dimension. You will see here that the first layer is cardstock after I inked it with paint, and then underneath it is the black foam. And I only did that on the outside. I did not do that on the inside because obviously I already had chipboard here on this other side. So these I just laid flat in the card. But I'll get to the inside in a minute. So let's see here. We talked about Dracula, his inking, and we talked about the bats and the black inking. The gunmetal inking. And then I used the same technique, like I said before, with this gold foil paper to do the gold accents on the window so that, it would just look fancier, more distressed. Yeah, okay, so I think I've covered, let's see here. Oh, the window. So I cut the window out of this Biggs die. So I used two different die cut machines actually. I used my what is this machine called? I'm having a brain. Oh, my Big Kick, my Sizzix Big Kick, in order to cut this one out, and all of these others are thin wafer dies. So I use my diamond press die cut machine to do those. I love my diamond press. So anyway, so this is part number 664974, and it's called Cathedral Window. And yeah, so I wanted to achieve a distressed look, and I achieved that here by using gunmetal paint and gold foiling to distress the window. And so I cut it, the outside part I cut out of brown cardstock, like I said, gold foiling to achieve the window look. So yeah, I think that covers everything that I did on the front of the card. Yeah, I think so. And I forgot to say, I did use like this palette knife to apply the texture paste. And of course I used my Tim Holtz scissors to cut, the gold around there, and just, anything that I needed to cut, like I used my Tim Holtz scissors. Here's my paint brushes. And I don't think I used any inking on the front other than the brown. Okay, so moving along to the inside of the card. So we'll start with the background. So this paper here, all throughout that I used, was from this paper pad from Michaels. It's called Witch's Lair. This was not, I don't think this was last year. Let's see if there's a year on here. 2023, I think. I think I bought this the year before last. Yeah. And so this was just a 12 by 12 paper pad. It's really cool. And I used that paper right there. And this is the scraps that I had left over. All right. So I used that as the background for this card. And then, so I use the inside pieces of the gold foil cathedral window to inlay them here. So then the frame that I had left over, I used it on the inside of this card. But before I put it down, I distressed it. So I used my Copic marker. I actually have two black ones. I use this one for whenever I want to like do any like detail or cover up the edges of anything, so that, I don't use this one for coloring like images, because this one is going to get beat up more than my regular coloring one. So you'll see I did like some accents like here, some distressing. Since this is gold foil, I wanted to make sure that it stayed. So I just, distressed the edges and the parts of the window with this alcohol marker. And then I did try to do some of like the paint, like the metallic paint, but I really wasn't. I just did like just a little bit here, but the rest I distressed with my Copic marker. So I cut some more bats out and I used them on the inside, and I also distressed them with the gunmetal. I did the same technique as the front of the card to achieve this blood splatter, and then just, added, when any part that wasn't glossy enough for me, I added the Nouveau Crystal Glaze, which is the same thing as like Glossy Accents, the Tim Holtz brand. And I forgot to mention, in order to glue down this entire piece, like the Dracula and the cathedral window, I used my 3-in-1 glue. Okay. All of the little die cut pieces, when I glue them together, I used my art glitter glue. I like this for small pieces. Also, to glue the bats onto the foam, I also use this. And I also use this to glue the foam onto the card itself, like all of these bats. And then here, I did actually pop up the cathedral window here. I don't know if you can tell, but there's black foam behind the cathedral window, so I use that too. So I guess I cut this out as well. I think my scraps for that is in there somewhere. And yeah, so, and I, used probably this a lot because it gives me some like wiggle room. And yeah, so wherever I could, like if it was like a big, and I think the other thing that I did do that I didn't mention, it was here on Mr. Dracula. You'll see it's like a very thick right there, but there are a lot of layers, because I die cut him out of 110-pound paper, just this layer here. I cut multiple layers of his like face and put it behind him so I could have the same effect as like chipboard. And I wanted him to be like nice and sturdy. So yeah, I forgot to mention that. I did pop that up, and I did use some foam tape, some black foam to pop up his body down here as well to like lift him up off of the card. Okay, so going back to the inside. Now, along the edges of the inside of the card, I did use black soot distress ink for inking, as well as hickory smoke, mainly because my black soot is kind of dried out right now. I need to re-ink it. So I went ahead and pulled out my hickory smoke just so that I could add a little bit more inking without it being like too dark. Just kind of like do a blend there. And what else? Okay, so now we're going to get to this part here. So what I used here was a mixture. I went into my alphabet drawer for all of my thickers and my alphabet stickers, and I used a combo. So for this black, I kind of liked it. It looked like very Dracula to me, very vampire. I used American Craft stickers, the Bewitched one. I've had this in my stash forever, and I'm so happy I used it. I had already actually used this before. I think I used this when I did like a Miami Heat shadow box for one of my old bosses. So anyway, so this has, and I'll tell you why, because like this has a like very like silvery, not silvery, but like a white glitter to it. And I didn't want it to be like too shiny. Like I didn't want like Twilight Vampire, because my husband's like a little too manly for that. So this actually doesn't have quite, it still is a little bit shiny, but the glitter's a little muted. How I achieved that was I went ahead and the other reason I did it is because some of the black glitter was starting to flake off, and I can't stand that. So I used this Nouveau Glaze. I just put a couple of drops on there, and then with my finger I just rubbed it to kind of like you know, just put a little bit layer of this glue over top of it so that it won't flake off, but at the same time still kind of be shiny and pop out. So what that did is it kind of muted that glittery effect, but it's still very like shiny and cool, but it's just not like glitter. So I liked that. And also, before I lay these down, these are just the little extra details that I do, um because if you'll notice, like here on the edge of the chipboard, it's like, you know, it's like gray, it's like chipboard. So what I do is whenever I'm going to be laying down any kind of dimensional chipboard or dimensional embellishment like that, or even like inking the sides of paper, like I take this paper and I ink it. Everything that I lay down, I always ink the edges. I don't like it to look. So what I did is I took this black marker, and on the edges of every chipboard, I went ahead and like inked the inside and inked the back before I glue it down. I did the same with these as well. You'll notice they kind of have like a little bit of a black shadow on the sides, and that's because I used these stickers here. They're called Flaky. And these are kind of funky. They have like different fonts in the same package. And apparently I got these at Marshall's for $1. Here, you can see, if you can see it down here. I got these eons ago. Originally, they were sold at Marshall's for $1.49, and I got them on clearance for $1. And these have the date of 2012. So I bought them sometime between like 2012 and 2014, I'm sure. But anyway, those were back in the days when Marshalls used to actually sell leftover craft supplies. Those were the good days. And they had some really good deals. So anyway, so I've had this in my stash for quite a while. And I did have a couple packages of this because I did score it at a good price. Now, I will say some of these, you can see the letters are moving around and they're kind of sticking to each other. So that's another reason why I used the black to kind of cover any like damaged pieces. So the same thing with this, if you'll look at this letter here, like the edges of it are gray, but I went ahead and I inked all of that and the middle of the letters to be black. And if I was working on something where I needed it to be brown or like more like a vintage color, then I wouldn't use black. I would probably use a brown marker. So yeah, so I used those stickers to do this part, the 45th, and then I inked the edges, and then I used these little stickers from my stash. They are my little shoebox. Yeah, my little shoebox. I've had these in my stash forever as well. So these were great because they were already black and they had just white font. And I used that to do the TH right here. And I also inked, so I had to cut these stickers because you can see the length is a little bit longer. So I just cut some of the black part off so that I could get it a little bit smaller. And before I laid it down, I did ink the edges of the stickers with the black marker, because if I had laid it down, it was like a white core. So anyway, so I think that explains everything that I did here on the inside. And when I was laying this to dry, I kind of put it like propped up like this because I didn't want my cat to like come and like step on it. I was, after I had put some of the embossing powder, because we were crafting and and we like stepped away to like go have lunch or something, and I didn't want my cat to come and mess with it. So some of the embossing powder had kind of like fallen to the inside crack of the card. And I don't know if the camera's going to pick it up, but there's like red splatter in the middle of the card. It's not showing up very well. So I went ahead and heat embossed that, and it actually like looks really cool because it looks like small blood splatter there. Okay, so that pretty much takes care of, and to glue all of these letters down, I just use my art glitter glue because of course it has a fine tip, super easy to work with, and it's incredibly sturdy. I also use that glue to glue all of the embellishments on this, on the inside of the card. And then on the back side of the card, of course, I use my Handmade with Love stamp that one of my crafty friends made for me years ago. And I just put the year 2025. I used my marker to write that in. And so for the back, I just didn't want to leave it like stark white. So what I did is on the edges, I inked it with some black soot and this hickory smoke. Actually, I think just the hickory smoke. And then since at the time that I was doing the back, I was inking up some of the extra bats that I had cut for the inside. So I went ahead and used this brush, just a dry brush, and I dipped it in some of this Martha Stewart gunmetal paint. And then I just kind of like dipped it around and then just kind of like cleaned the brush off on the paper like this, so that I could achieve like this like dirty, grungy look. Like it's just like old. So that's what I did there. And then I just inked the edges with some hickory smoke. So so that pretty much walks through all of the techniques and everything that I did in order to put this card together. It is because of the heat embossing, it did warp a little bit, but it's not too bad. I could always like straighten it out if I wanted to, but everything's like really glued down, so it's okay. But it's a very like artsy mixed media card, so it doesn't matter if it doesn't lay flat. But anyway, I hope you guys are inspired. I use a lot of stuff that was in my stash, stuff that I've had forever, stuff that I just got. Like I think I just got this like over the holidays. I think I may have done a video where I hauled this from Joann's recently. But everything else I've pretty much had in my stash like for a while. Like this I got on clearance at Hobby Lobby back when they used to actually sell dies. And now they don't, which really, really sucks. But anyway, so got to play with a lot of goodies. And I had this out because I used my silicone mat for all of my heat embossing and for my like mixed media painting and mixing. So anyway, I hope you guys are inspired. I hope you guys like my card. I know my husband is like so incredibly happy, and this is probably one of my favorite ones yet that I've made for him. And well, I hope you guys are having a great January. And until the next post, I remain Christina LaCrafty. Bye.